thank you, Zellnor, so much for coming tonight. It's just amazing to have you here. And thank you to Sarah Rowan and Max Abraham. So nice of you to organize this event. I just want to say this is going to be easy. My partner in crime, Nancy, a neighbor in the building, and I heard about a certain state senator who was not doing well by our district. And the name was out there of someone who could serve the district honestly, with integrity, intelligence, and an innovative spirit about policy, a smart person aside from an interest even in politics, just a good person. And Nancy and I together knocked on doors throughout the district for Zellnor Myrie, and I was thrilled to see you in. So all I want to do with these few minutes is to say how thrilled I have been, way beyond expectation, with what Zellnor Myrie has done with this short time in office. As a state senator, he has ticked off every box for me of top priorities. Affordable housing, affordable housing, affordable housing. And he's not concerned only with renters, and has done, I'll let you fill in the blanks here, has done so much on stabilizing rent stabilization for renters, but also deed theft, which has been a horrible issue in New York City. People losing their homes without even realizing that they've lost their legal ownership of their homes. So it's always about housing, and that's number one, what has impressed me. You have the most ambitious housing plan of all of the candidates so far who've thrown their hat into the ring. So I'll let you talk about that. But I just want to hit two more. One is gun safety. Gun violence has been a horror show in New York City. I don't think we could really say anything cheerier about it than that. Zellnor Myrie has innovated a policy, the first in the country, to hold gun manufacturers liable. That in itself is an impressive achievement for such a short time in office in Albany. But the third one is most important to me. We were just talking about this before, that at a time of uncertainty, as the national stage changes hands, there will be so many concerns there that we will have trouble controlling. But we can do so much at the state and city level. And to hear that Zellnor Myrie was willing to take on New York City as a mayoral candidate, and hopefully our next mayor, I know that he will be able to give us the leadership at the local level that we have not had with Mayor Adams, sadly. So democracy is a huge issue to me, and that's why I saved it for last. Because of Zellnor Myrie, largely, I'm sure there are a few other people. Because of Zellnor Myrie, we have the John R. Lewis New York Voting Rights Act. I was just, carrying on a minute ago about Lawrence Holder Jr. Coming to one of our last commencements, who spent so much of his life fighting for the Voting Rights Act, to spare it, to save it, to salvage it. But as I said, there's going to be so much that will be unraveled at the national level. So to be able to work on that at the state level and to bring that home to the city level, that you have the energy and passion and foresight to do, you are the one with those leadership abilities, and I thank you for running. So now we can.
Thank you. Des, I don't know if I have to give a stump speech. No, I'm so grateful for the kind words, for the generous introduction. I want to thank you for helping to organize this. I want to thank you for the work that you did back in 2018 with Nancy and others here to help us get to the state senate. I'm just grateful, particularly when people open up their homes, their personal spaces. It's not easy to ask people to come to things, and it's not easy to ask for money and all that good stuff. So just thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to talk about the upcoming election in June of this year, but I think a lot of us are still processing and still trying to figure out what happened in November. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump got 30% in New York City, the highest amount that a Republican candidate has received since 1988. And there's been a lot of attention paid to that, and I get it, I totally understand. How could he get so much? The Republic is at stake, and here in New York City, he got 30%. But there's been another number that has disturbed my spirit a little more, and that's 600,000. 600,000 New York City voters who came out in 2020 in a once-in-a-century pandemic, voted for President Biden. And in this year's election, they didn't come out and vote for Donald Trump. They didn't come out at all. At all. 600,000 New York City voters with our republic at stake said, I'm sitting this one out. That is bad. That is bad. And these are people that we know. These are people that we ride the bus with, these are people that we work with, these are people that we see at the stores. It's not bad people. But they feel failed by their government and by leadership. We gotta figure that out. Now, I don't have all the answers. But I think New Yorkers are simple people. We got a lot of opinions, of course. But I think we are simple people. I think people want to feel safe, and they want to be able to afford to stay here. That's it. Feel safe. It's a human thing. If you can afford to stay here, then you can take advantage of us being the opportunity capital of the world. It can be anything you want to be in this city. You can be a teacher, you can be a social worker, you can open up a business, you can be a young professional in the legal, media, financial capital of the world. You can be a healthcare professional, you can be anything. But you can't if there's no place to live and no place to stay. That opportunity is why my parents came here. My parents are from Costa Rica. Both of them came to Brooklyn. Both worked in factories when they got here. My dad worked in a sponge making factory. Became a public school teacher, taught special education in the Bronx for 22 years. Come on now.
Special education in the Bronx. My parents worked in factories.
Wow.
My mother worked in a Christmas light factory.
Wow.
Seasonal.
Wow.
Puerto Rican.
It's a New York story. My mom worked in a linen factory in Greenpoint. Became a nurse, then a small business owner. She had a jewelry shop on Flatbush. Sent me to public schools right here in Brooklyn. I went to PS 161 in Crown Heights. And then I went to Brooklyn Tech for high school. Yeah, that's Brooklyn Tech in their house, you know what I'm saying? Yes. Went to Fordham University for undergrad and grad school. And then I went to Cornell for law school. I got to work at one of the best law firms in the world, Davis Polk. And then I ran for state senate, representing these communities and the community that I was born and raised in. I'm celebrating 2 months over my 1-year wedding anniversary, which is still amazing. My wife and I went to the same elementary school. Wow. Both of her parents, immigrants that came to Brooklyn. We live 3 blocks from that very elementary school right now. But the prospect of us owning a home in that neighborhood feels impossible. We have a 21-year-old son, we're very proud of him. We want to expand our family. I want to have little Zellnors running around. The average cost of childcare, $22,000 per kid per year. It feels impossible. And when we look to City Hall for solutions, y'all know what we're getting. Headlines, distractions, corruption, silence. So I don't have to spend too much time in this room talking about why we need a new mayor. We need a new mayor. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of city that I want to lead. The kind of city that attracted my parents, that attract people from all over the world, where you can have opportunity, where you can be safe, where you can raise your family. Childcare should be affordable for all working families. That should go without saying. We shouldn't be cutting pre-K seats, we shouldn't be cutting 3K seats. We should be uplifting that system, maintaining it, expanding it. But I also think we need after school for everybody. I'm a product of after school. I was either in the Brooklyn Public Library on Flatbush Avenue after school, or in something called the Crown Heights Youth Collective. My mom, like most New Yorkers, didn't get off at 2:30, couldn't pick me up from school, so I needed to be in a safe place where I could reinforce what I learned during the day, or where I could learn karate, or where I could learn how to play chess, or where I could be the only boy on the step team. Let me be a kid, somewhere safe. Wasn't just relief for my mom, because she had to work, it was also a public safety tool. We can have that for every family in this city. That's what I'm gonna do as the next mayor. And we gotta have an honest conversation about public safety. Now, I've been taking public transit my whole life. I remember the first time I got on the bus by myself. Back in the day, you had to show the pass to the bus driver. There was no Metro card. And I remember I was so proud. I was in the first grade, I had my uniform on, and I was like, look at me, I'm taking the bus by myself. I would find out years later that my mom was driving behind the bus to make sure that I was okay. So I say that to say, I'm a public transit consumer, commuter, through and through. But if we're being honest, things feel different now. They feel different. And we have New Yorkers who are suffering right before us. And they're posing a threat to themselves and in some cases a threat to others. And our city agencies know who they are. We have 2,500 to 3,000 chronically mentally ill folks in the city that interact with our agencies, but they don't talk to each other. No one's held accountable to help relieve people from suffering. And we have individuals who help, who are prepared to do it, but our hospitals are not incentivized to keep people after they're diagnosed and to give them the treatment that they know they deserve because they don't get reimbursed for it. And the solution can also be to send them to Rikers, where they deteriorate even further. There is a middle ground. There is a place where people can get the help they need, get the diagnosis, stay if they need to stay, and be put on a path to real recovery. But it takes leadership and cutting through red tape to get that done. Janice mentioned gun violence. 4% of our blocks in the city are responsible for 90% of the gun violence. 4%. We have made a decision as a city, as a government, that we're gonna allow for gun violence to flourish in some places and not others. I wanna do something radical. I wanna solve every shooting. Every shooting. Not just fatal shootings, non-fatal shootings. People say, Z, how are you gonna get this done? That's too radical. There are other jurisdictions in this country that have detective bureaus that are solely focused on solving shootings. And why is that important? If I am a victim or survivor of gun violence, and I know that there's going to be some measure of justice and accountability, then I have no problem talking to law enforcement. I have no problem saying, here's the help that I need. But if you live in a community and we live in a city where the clearance rate, the rate at which we are solving our crimes, is below 40%, why would you engage? And to someone who is likely to resolve a conflict with a gun, if you know that there's going to be no accountability, you're going to keep doing the same thing. In jurisdictions where we've seen this focus on solving shootings, shootings have come down dramatically. Homicides have come down. Crime has come down. But it takes leadership to get it done. I'm going to solve every shooting as the next mayor of this city. And as we can give it up for that. And as Janice mentioned, almost everything comes back to housing. Gotta be able to afford to stay here. We launched our campaign officially with a thing called Rebuild NYC, a mandate for 1 million homes over the next decade, preservation, importantly, of 300,000, and the creation of another 700,000. And people have said, Z, 1 million homes? We can't get that done. I said, hold up. We built the Empire State Building in 13 months. 100 years ago. Don't tell me New York City can't do big things anymore. We used to create 70,000 units every single year in the 1930s. Don't tell me we can't do big things anymore. You think it's too ambitious? Okay, you be a naysayer. Let the people with vision get the job done. Let us get it done. Gotta be able to afford to stay here. But it takes commitment, attention to detail, urgency, leadership. These are the things I've been proud to be about in the state Senate. So you mentioned, I chaired the elections committee for 6 years. Literally that changed today. It was announced by the leader that I now will be chairing the codes committee in the state Senate. I'll still be on the elections committee. Don't fret. But my first day on the job in 2019 as the chair of the elections committee, I passed something called early voting. We were the 38th state to get this done. 38th state. But we caught up. A couple of weeks later, we passed something called the Reproductive Health Act. Codified Roe v. Wade years before the Supreme Court struck it down. And then a couple of weeks after that, we passed the most forward-looking climate legislation in the entire country. Closed out the session with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, something that I led on. The most advanced tenant protections that the state has seen in half a century. And I did all that in the first 6 months. The first 6 months, urgency. And we didn't stop there. Janice mentioned the bill that we introduced, we wrote, we passed to take on the gun industry. And you know what? People told us you can't do this. They said, Z, no other state in the country has passed a law like this. You can't take on the gun industry. Too powerful. I said, okay, watch us. We passed it. It's the law. 4 years later, 10 other states total have similar laws on the books. Tens of millions of Americans now can go into a court, get justice, hold bad actors accountable because New York stepped up. That's what we need. And just 2 months ago, in November, a bill I wrote went into effect called the Clean Slate Act. And this stood for a very simple proposition. If you've been convicted of a crime, or you've served your time, you've paid your dues, you've remained out of trouble, we will seal that conviction for purposes of applying for housing, applying for a job, applying for education. And people said, you're not gonna get that done either. You can't, not in this climate. It's okay, watch us do it. We built coalition, Fortune 500 companies, JP Morgan, Microsoft, Verizon, Chambers of Commerce, the Business Council of New York, the Partnership for New York City, every major labor union, community advocates, reform advocates, all came to the table. I wrote 8 different versions of that bill to get it done. That consistency, that ability to build, to listen, that's the kind of leadership we need in City Hall.
Yes.
So, sometimes people ask me, say, Z, you're a nice guy. You're young. Why on earth would you want to be mayor of this city?
We need you.
Yeah, so that's a fair question. That's a fair question. But here's the truth. I'm not as concerned about my political future. I'm very concerned about the future of our city. There were people that stepped up and fought for me who didn't know who I was, who will never meet me, but they stood up and said, we have to fight for the future. There are children, families, that are depending on all of us in this moment to fight for them. What kind of city are we gonna leave them? What kind of city are we gonna become? Where we can't have intergenerational housing, where people can't age with dignity, where people can't raise their families. We have to do better. And is it tough running for mayor? Yes. Is there a lot of BS? Yes. Will there be some tough weeks, some tough months? Yes. But we have to do it. We have to do it. So the way we're gonna get it done is exactly what we're doing tonight. Community space by community space, living room by living room. That's how we do it. Now I'm really excited because the city has a very robust matching program. So for every $1 that a New York City resident gives, the city will match it $8. And they do that up until $250. So $250 becomes $2,000 for the campaign. So look, if you've ever had a dream of being a big donor, come on. I know many of you have already given. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Consider giving again if you can. But also share our link, because we have a really important deadline coming up this Saturday at midnight. Why is it important? Next week our numbers are going to be public. And the media, now that we're past the general election in November, they're going to be looking at the local race, they're going to be focused on the mayoral candidates, they're going to want to know who is raising money, who has momentum, who is viable. So it's important that we demonstrate strength. But it's also important because petitioning to get on the ballot starts next month, right around the corner. And we gotta have the resources to build a campaign infrastructure for the entire city so that we can get on the ballot and we can start building out our campaign. So, thank you so much, again, for hosting, for giving me this opportunity, and I'm happy to take a couple of questions. Thank you very much. And I always say, if you're afraid to ask in front of the class, I'm happy to take it offline, email, whatever is necessary.
I don't know, on education, and in terms of teachers, and I was a teacher, and do you have, what ideas do you have in terms of education? Because that's a big issue. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've been retired for about 18 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how teachers teach now.
Mm-hmm.
All the demands on them, but also, just seems to me that people are always looking for some kind of magic solution for their kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I always remember the story about people from Finland that came here, educational people, and they're supposed to have this great education system. I know they're a different kind of society and all that, but they came here, they saw a whole bunch of stuff, and at the end of it they said, none of that stuff is for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with them. I was glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But so what ideas do you have on education?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It is, you know, the son of a public school teacher, my dad had a lot of thoughts on things that we can be doing differently and really things we can be doing to support teachers in the classroom. And one of the things that I think you're alluding to about how do they teach now, our class sizes are huge. They're huge. It's unmanageable in many instances. We passed a law on the state level to reduce class sizes. Here's the problem. The Department of Education here has refused to implement the law. And so the money that we were giving to help them with implementation, they did not use it for implementation. And so now we're about 3 years behind. It was actually just in the paper today that they instituted a sort of competition of sorts between the schools to put forward, principals to put forward their own plans on how they would reduce the class sizes. And if you look at where we are, there's been an unfortunate reduction in the total student population. We're about 100,000 below what we've been on average for the past couple of years, which is why all of the vitriol around our newest New Yorkers and migrants making their way over has been particularly annoying because we have an opportunity to fill our seats in our schools and to do this the right way. But setting that aside, we got to reduce class sizes to make it easier to teach and to make it easier for kids to learn. There are some elements of mayoral control that I think are good and necessary. You got to have someone that is accountable. There are people who like to call this mayoral accountability and not mayoral control. But I also think that there has to be a little less centralization on some of the decision making so that the people that are closest to the kids can make the decisions on how to best teach them and how to help them. So I'd like to see, while I agree with mayoral accountability, I do think that there needs to be some more input from the folks that are actually doing the job. And then lastly, I would say, you know, my after-school proposal is something that I plan to be doing in conjunction with our teachers and with our principals, but because for a lot of our students, and you know this as an educator, this is the highlight of their days. It's the only place where they're going to get food. It's the only place where they're going to feel safe. And I think that we can have a continuum of help for a lot of our vulnerable students who rely on our education system and not just after school, but out of school. It's not that parents stop working in the summer, right? You know, once the summer hits, then what do you do? And so I think that we got to be doing more on that front. That of course has to come with the commensurate wages and helping people. And I have a study that we passed on the state level that is going to give us how much that's going to cost to provide universal after school, the support for our educators and also the nonprofits. That report is due to us in April, and I plan to use that as a blueprint for some of the things we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Senator, thank you so much for speaking with us on this. My son is a special needs student. He attends a program. We live in Park Slope, but he goes to a school in Bensonhurst because they have a wonderful program there that's focused on autism. But the problem is, it's January and he still doesn't have a bus to take him to school. So the city sends a car service every day. I imagine that costs the city a fortune to do that for all these kids. And I understand that there's a shortage of bus drivers. There's like 300 bus drivers that they need to hire and they haven't been able to. And I don't know if you're familiar with this issue already or what your thoughts are about how we can solve that to provide busing for kids, because apparently my kid's not a special case. A lot of kids are having.
So I will confess to not knowing that the driver shortage was in the realm of 300.
Okay.
And I think it is emblematic, unfortunately, of the understaffing, not just in our education department, but in a lot of the vital city services and government services that we rely on every day to help vulnerable New Yorkers. And so we have a lot of vacancies, and we have not had a focus on recruitment and retention so that we can continue to provide these services. more broadly speaking, I don't think that the city does a good job helping our students with disabilities. When I was an associate at Davis Polk, I worked on a case pro bono with then public advocate Letitia James when she sued the Department of Education for the flaws in the CSIS system and where there was, I think, credible allegations that there was misuse of Medicaid funding that was supposed to be used to help students with disabilities, but that was being wasted on a lot of other bloated contracts. And this was before I ran for Senate, before anything. So I say that to say that I'm sensitive to what we are doing with our students with disabilities, and I think we have to be doing a lot more. There have been some flaws in our District 75 system where they're not getting the adequate resources that they need, and I'd love to hear more from you, not necessarily in this moment, on other gaps that you think need to be filled, because I think this is really, these are our most vulnerable students that need the support, and that is what we pay taxes for them to be supported, and we've made a decision that we have not supported them at the adequate level. So I'd love to talk more about what we could do. Okay. Thank you. I really appreciate you taking some time to be with us. Thank you again for opening up this space. And this won't be the last time that we're talking.
All right.